Civil asset forfeiture is anti-American. Because of the headlines and the quote-unquote news articles that are not very accurate or intellectually honest, by the way, many of you are hearing about civil asset forfeiture for the first time. Jeff Sessions, the U.S. Attorney General, appointed by Trump, basically the prosecuting lawyer for the White House, supposedly wants to expand civil asset forfeiture. Now, some argue that it will only affect big drug lords, but they should say suspected drug lords. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's irrelevant. It's the principle that matters. Now, it seems obvious, and many agree, that it violates our right to due process of law under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. So, what is civil asset forfeiture? Well, basically, if law enforcement suspects, or says that they suspect, that assets are being used in, let's say, dealing illegal drugs, like the vehicles used to transport illegal drugs or houses used to hold the drugs, can be seized and become the property of the state. Notice I said they are suspected of a crime. One need not be found guilty in a court of law. One need not even be charged with a crime. If one is released without charge, one does not get their assets back. If one is found not guilty in a court of law, one does not get their assets back. So again, it seems obvious that it violates the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, and actually the 14th Amendment as well, of the U.S. Constitution. However, it has apparently been ruled to be constitutional. In their decision in the case of Benison, Michigan in 1996, the Supreme Court briefly described a number of cases going back to the 1800s dealing with the constitutionality of civil asset forfeiture and ruling it to be constitutional. They described, for example, a few cases in which someone let their automobile be used to transport what was illegal liquor at that time, but these are cases where someone was charged with a crime, tried, and found guilty, and in which it was ruled that the person who owned the property, the automobile for example, did not break the law but forfeited their property when they let it be used by the guilty party to break the laws they were ruled to have violated. That's not the same thing as seizing and keeping the property of someone who, let's say, was not found guilty or even formally charged with a crime. It's not the same thing. Civil asset forfeiture goes back centuries before the USA, by the way. It was long used to deal with piracy, for example. But in the USA, the jurisprudence goes back to the 1800s. So basically, this is a way for the government, for police, for DEA, for ATF to look at somebody and say, you know, I like their boat, I like their car, I like their house, I like their real estate, I like their furniture. Let's go seize these people's assets. No, they don't have to be guilty. We don't even have to charge them with a crime. We just have to go in, arrest them, seize their assets, say, oops, sorry, wrong house, but technically speaking, your stuff is now ours. This is something you would expect in fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, North Korea today, not something you would expect in the USA. But we have it. Consider subscribing to the Drug War Chronicle put out by the Drug Policy Alliance. Check out their website, check out their arguments on civil asset forfeiture. I'm going to put links for all of these below in the description. You should really read about it, you should check it out. And if you're not shocked that we have civil asset forfeiture laws, then you don't quite understand what they are. According to the Drug Policy Alliance, quote, civil asset forfeiture allows the government to seize cash, cars, real estate, and other property suspected of being connected to criminal activity. In civil forfeiture actions, the property itself, rather than an individual, is believed to be connected to a crime. In fact, under federal law, as well as many state laws, property can be seized and forfeited even when criminal charges are never filed against a property owner, as is the case in a staggering 80% of civil asset forfeitures. 80%. There is, of course, a link to this and other websites. A growing number of critics, including citizens, defense attorneys, and civil rights advocates in California, Missouri, Florida, and other states say the law violates the U.S. Constitution and a basic tenet of the criminal justice system, unquote. This may sound naive to someone who's formally studied law, but duh! At any rate, I say, if it's constitutional, well then we need to rectify that with an amendment. Also, I say any politician in support of this should be publicly shamed. It's so against the spirit of our constitutional republic that I consider to be traitorous. Newsflash, a person is innocent unless and until they are proven to be guilty in a court of law by an impartial jury of their peers. Okay folks, there's something called the burden of proof. If you accuse somebody, like let's say Antifa, if you accuse somebody of being a Nazi, you, the person who is accusing, has the burden of proof. In other words, it's your responsibility to prove your claims. It is not the other person's responsibility to prove you wrong. The burden of proof is on the person making the initial claim. In other words, if somebody comes out and says you're a Nazi, it's their burden of proof. If you make the claim, the burden of proof is yours. If you're law enforcement and you say somebody's guilty of trafficking, manufacturing, holding drugs, selling drugs, whatever, it is your burden, or the state's burden of proof, to prove that accusation to be true. Civil asset forfeiture simply considers the accused to be guilty, and their assets are seized. There are endless cases of this happening. Please see the Drug War Chronicle and the other links I've put below to support my claims. The Drug War Chronicle is something put out by the Drug Policy Alliance every week. You can receive it in your emails. Each week they have this week's corrupt cop stories. In this section could be found endless examples of corrupt law enforcement basically stealing from people and using civil asset forfeiture as their excuse. By the way, since we're on the subject, I'd just like to point out to all of you hypocrites out there, the most amount of unjust activities related to the federal government basically bullying and persecuting people for minor drug offenses, you know, basically sending them away and ruining their lives for having a joint or something like that, was under Obama's administration. But you don't hear people saying he's fascist. Under Obama, the attitude was, we tell the states what to do. We are the empire, and they obey us. Okay, so don't be a fucking hypocrite. If you're against the drug war, Obama is the biggest perpetrator of the drug war America has ever had. Fuck civil asset forfeiture, fuck Jeff Sessions, and fuck Trump if he doesn't rein this asshole in. Well, what do you think, folks? Leave me a comment. Please spread the word about this. Share this video all over social media. Thanks for watching, and thanks for caring.